In fiction, especially fantasy, books are powerful. Not just in the public library reading opens doors kind of way, but in a very literal sense. In Harry Potter alone, there are books that scream when you open them up, diaries that drain your life force as soon as you confide in them, and textbooks that literally attempt to eat the students assigned to read them. But that's a very literal interpretation of a dangerous book. Not all of them are like that. The Necronomicon from H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos is just a book with a lot of forbidden knowledge in it. The King in Yellow is a play, not a book, but it seems to have no more power than being so beautifully written that it breaks the human mind. These are all exciting, of course, but pretty far-fetched. This is all just fantasy, unless you end up with the worst paper cut of all time or bludgeoned to death with an encyclopedia. In real life, books can't really kill you, can they? Are you enjoying the video so far? I hope so. We release one of these pretty much every week, which means that, after this one, you'll have to wait at least another 7 days for your next Foundry fix. Although, technically, you don't really have to. We've actually made a ton of stuff that isn't up here on YouTube, like this video about the morphology of angels and why artists always give them wings, or this one about artificial life as a magic system. We even made a whole original series called Worldsmiths about our favorite authors and the unique landscapes of their minds. And hey, if you just don't want to wait for next week's YouTube video, the truth is, it's actually already out. That's right. You can watch it right now, ad-free, along with everything else I just mentioned, over on our streaming platform, Nebula. Visit go.nebula.tv/TaleFoundry to sign up for just $2.50 a month. Or, if you join right now, you could get a lifetime membership for just $300 altogether. Pay for it just once, and then never again. It's honestly one of the cheapest and best ways to support the show. Thanks so much to everyone who checks it out. Before we get into it here, I do want to say there's going to be some pretty heavy stuff in this video. When I say these books are dangerous, I'm talking things like hate crimes, terrorism, mass shootings, and very particularly suicide. So please, if any of these things are sensitive topics for you, go forward with caution, or feel free not to go forward at all. Okay? Okay. The most famous example of a dangerous book in fiction is, of course, the one and only Necronomicon. I mentioned it right at the start of the video because it pretty much codified the trope of the forbidden tome containing unholy knowledge beyond mortal ken. Large, leather-bound, ancient, mysterious. But what exactly is, in there? H.P. Lovecraft didn't tell us too much about the Necronomicon's contents, but we do know a couple of things. It contains knowledge about eldritch entities, some in untranslated ancient languages. It contains knowledge on how to defeat those entities, but it also contains information on how to summon them. Because of that, the scholars in H.P. Lovecraft's work tend to keep the Necronomicon locked up fairly tight. Very few copies are known to exist, partly because the book was banned in-universe by both Patriarch Michael I and Pope Gregory IX. The guardians of the few found in university libraries are deeply distrustful of anyone who shows up trying to get their hands on a copy. The closest real-world analog I can think of to this sort of dangerous book, a book that contains actual, objective knowledge that can cause untold destruction, would be The Anarchist Cookbook by William Powell. The book contains instructions for making explosives, drugs, and poisons, tips on killing people with knives and piano wire, pointers on hot wiring a car, and more. All sprinkled with decidedly false anecdotes about its 19-year-old author's exciting life as an anti-war rebel. But even though the narrative itself is fake, a lot of the recipes in it are, unfortunately, very real. The Anarchist Cookbook came out at the perfect time, when the pacifist counterculture of the 1960s was beginning to boil into the left-wing extremism of the 1970s. Before the book was published, there were already dozens of politically motivated bombings a year. In the year after the Anarchist's Cookbook was published, that increased to about 5 a day. And while some of those were in line with Powell's original left-wing anti-government ideals, those were far from the only radicals who found the book useful. Powell was white, but in the cookbook he wrote that the revolution had already started and that, quote, "It is a battle between the poor blacks and the rich employers. It is a battle between the artists and the censors. It is a battle between the Black Panthers and the police." It's tragically ironic, then, that this book ended up empowering some of the most notorious white supremacist terrorist attacks of the last 50 years, including the Oklahoma City bombings of 1995, which killed 168 people. Alongside that, the Anarchist Cookbook has been linked to attacks carried out by anti-war activists, Puerto Rican separatists, Croatian radicals, anti-abortion extremists, Islamic terrorists, including the suicide bombings in London on July 7, 2005 that killed 52 people, and various mass shootings. Because of this, it's illegal to possess in Australia, and people have been prosecuted for owning it in the UK. There are a number of books like this that offer instructions for dangerous and illegal acts. The Poor Man's James Bond, The Big Book of Mischief, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. Some of them are by climate activists, others are by neo-Nazis, and still others have no particular ideology associated with them at all. Some of them are better written or more accurate than the Anarchist's Cookbook, but none of them even approach its level of notoriety. There's one book in particular here that feels even more evil than the Necronomicon. It doesn't house incantations or descriptions of great cosmic evils, just a staggering excess of ordinary human evil. It's called the Turner Diaries, and it's so bad, in fact, that I'm going to give you another warning. If you don't want to hear about neo-Nazi hate-mongering, skip to this timestamp. Trust me, this stuff is rough. Published in 1978 by William Luther Pierce, the founder of the white supremacist group The National Alliance, the Turner Diaries is a piece of realistic fiction set in a far-future white supremacist utopia. Most of the novel purports to be historical documentation of a war in the 1990s between a white supremacist group called the Organization and the US government, called the System. In the book, the organization slaughters non-whites and Jews, then later hangs quote-unquote race traitors in a mass lynching called the Day of the Rope. That particular terminology has become popular among American neo-Nazis trying to start a race war. The Turner Diaries has been found in the possession of perpetrators of multiple right-wing terrorist attacks against racial minorities, Jews, gay people, and immigrants, mostly in America, but also in Germany and the UK. And remember the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168 people? I mentioned it before because it was linked to the Anarchist's Cookbook. Yeah, well, the perpetrator of that liked this book too. The Turner Diaries is banned in Canada for obvious reasons, and in 2020 was removed from Amazon and all its subsidiaries. But you know what's still available in both Canada and on Amazon? The Anarchist's Cookbook. This is interesting to me because it implies that both Canada and Amazon think that the Turner Diaries is more dangerous than a book that contains instructions to make literal bombs. I think there's an interesting implication here, that a book can be dangerous not just for the literal material that it contains, but for the feelings it stirs in those who read it. You might recall a book I mentioned at the start of the video, The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. We've talked about it a lot on this channel because it's such an interesting version of this book with power idea, but it's a different kind of power than that of the Necronomicon or any of the other books we just discussed. The book itself is actually a collection of short stories which revolve around a fictional play called The King in Yellow, for which the book is named. In the story, anyone who reads the second act of the play goes insane and meets a terrible, often supernatural, fate. Nearly every country on the planet has banned the play, but naturally, that just increases the demand for it among the general populace. In the short story The Repairer of Reputations, Chambers writes of the play, "No definite principles had been violated within those wicked pages, no doctrine promulgated, no convictions outraged. It could not be judged by any known standards, yet, although it was acknowledged that the supreme note of art had been struck in The King in Yellow, all felt that human nature could not bear the strain, nor thrive on words in which the essence of purest poison lurked. The play itself doesn't actually seem to have anything bad in it. It doesn't even espouse any controversial ideology. It is a bit creepy, yes, but it's still just a play. Rather, its danger seems to be that its story is too moving. And that is not a fantastical phenomenon at all. In 1977, Stephen King wrote a book under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. It's called Rage, and it's about a delinquent high school senior named Charlie Decker who, after being expelled, retrieves a pistol from his locker, kills 2 teachers, and then proceeds to take his math class hostage. I bet you can already see where this is going. Back when the book was published, the idea of a teen taking a gun to school and shooting classmates and teachers indiscriminately was still actually in horror story territory. There had only been one modern school shooting at that point, the clock tower shooting at the University of Texas, Austin, in 1966, which had very little in common with the events of Rage. King probably never considered the possibility that something like what he wrote would really ever happen, let alone happen over and over until it was a national crisis. The book stayed fictional for 11 years, but was associated with 6 separate school shootings and hostage situations in the decade between 1988 and 1997. While it was never banned that I'm aware of, after it was found in the possession of the 14-year-old who shot 8 people at Heath High School in Paducah, Kentucky in 1997, King voluntarily pulled the book from print. 20 years after its publication, school shootings were, sadly, no longer fiction, but stark reality. Rage has a bit in common with the Turner Diaries, in that the protagonist is someone committing a terrible act. But while the Turner Diaries celebrates its evil, Rage is a horror novel. You're not supposed to think the scary thing in a horror novel is good. You're supposed to be scared by it. Yet, one of the shooters found to own Rage was said to identify with Charlie so strongly that he read the book over and over again. It turns out, a writer can't really control what their reader gets out of their work, which can lead to some unexpected and very unwanted outcomes. One of the most interesting things about The King in Yellow is that it doesn't just turn people outwardly violent, it also makes them self-destructive. A number of characters, after reading the book, end up taking their own lives in decidedly dramatic fashion, as if to capture the effect the book had on them. And this, too, is certainly not unheard of in real life. In 1774, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe wrote one of the first novels ever, The Sorrows of Young Werther. It's about a young man who takes his own life after his heart is broken twice in 2 separate love triangles. Werther was a near-instant success throughout Western Europe, and one of the first books to gain the sort of following we would today refer to as a fandom. Sorrows of Young Werther prints, porcelain, and even perfume were manufactured, and young men cosplayed in Werther's signature yellow trousers, blue coat, and high boots. But, in the vein of the rest of the works on this list, its popularity had a darker edge too. The Sorrows of Young Werther led to the first spate of what we now refer to as copycat suicides. Heartbroken young men, sometimes clutching the book or dressed in Werther's signature outfit, would recreate his death. Or, at least that's what people said. It's unclear if the claims were legitimate or merely a predecessor to some of the forms of moral panic we know and love today. Regardless, though, the book was banned in Italy and Denmark for that reason, and the city of Leipzig in Germany banned both the book and Werther's outfit. But, I think maybe the single most mystifying thing about The King in Yellow is that it's not really replicable in that way. The dangerous things it drives its readers to are, at best, vague allusions to the contents, but most of the time are only emotionally connected. As if the book just made the readers feel so much that they just felt compelled to do something. You've probably read Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. In high school, maybe. It's about a teenage boy who is expelled from his fancy boarding prep school and runs away to New York City for a weekend. And that's pretty much it. There's not really a plot in the traditional sense. The book is known for its main character, Holden Caulfield's ennui and general disillusionment with society. He frequently refers to other people as phonies, believing them to be superficial and selfish. This is probably the last book you would expect to have a body count, but, well, it does. The man who assassinated John Lennon sat down after the murder and flipped through a copy of it, in which he had written, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement." He so strongly identified with Holden that he also read a passage from the book at his trial. Then, in 1989, a man carrying a copy of the book murdered an up-and-coming young actress named Rebecca Schaefer, whom he had been stalking. Her death galvanized the passage of anti-stalking laws in California. The Catcher in the Rye is an especially weird example to me because Holden Caulfield doesn't actually do anything particularly bad. He reflects on death, sure, but he himself doesn't do anything worse than running away and starting a fistfight. And he's alive and even sort of hopeful at the end. The Catcher in the Rye is neither a tragedy nor a horror story. It's just a book about growing up or failing to. Catcher in the Rye is actually one of the most frequently banned books in America, but not because of any of those dangerous outcomes. It's banned because it has a bit of objectionable content. References to sex, alcohol, delinquency, lying. As in the case of most book bannings, rather than actually preventing some kind of threat, it seems the bans around this book are more about preventing ideas. But ideas are slippery. They happen in unexpected places, whether they're intended to or not. If we banned every book that made someone feel something, our bookshelves would be barren, and the world would be a much sadder place for it. Some books, it makes sense to ban. Like the Necronomicon, some books actually do contain information that can hurt people. But how do you keep people safe from a book like The King in Yellow? A book that, on its own, is not necessarily dangerous, but seems to keep having a dangerous effect on people. I think there is actually a pretty simple solution here. Rather than locking up the book in heavy chains and hiding it away in darkness never to be seen again, we should probably just learn how to read it, how to approach its information with a healthy skepticism, how to think critically so that the text doesn't decide our feelings for us. Because in real life, a book can't actually kill you all by itself. A book can only make you think. And I'm afraid that's all for this week. Our next video will be coming out in a week from now, so I'll see you then. Unless, of course, you don't want to wait. We've actually made a ton of stuff that isn't up here on YouTube, like this video about the morphology of angels and why artists always give them wings, or this one about artificial life as a magic system. We even made a whole original series called Worldsmiths about our favorite authors and the unique landscapes of their minds. And, of course, if you just don't want to wait, next week's YouTube video is actually already out and ready to be watched. That's right. You can watch it right now, ad-free, along with everything else I just mentioned, over on our streaming platform, Nebula. YouTube is kind of a crazy place to make content. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to have this platform, but you have to be so careful about your topic choices, your packaging, what you include in your videos. You just start to feel like you're walking on eggshells. Nebula doesn't have any of those concerns. It's an entirely different environment, devoid of all the weird YouTube cynicism. The entire platform was built by creators for creators. Every time you watch a video there, a creator you love is getting paid, and far more than they would ever get paid on YouTube. And on top of that, Nebula even helps its creators to fund incredible original content. You know, like our series, Worldsmiths. And we're not the only ones who have been busy over there. So many other amazing creators have started creating and sharing their own unique stuff on Nebula. like our friend Frankie from the channel A Bit Frank, or Tim from the channel Hello Future Me. Heck, there's even a high-production, independently run sci-fi audio drama over there called The Sojourn, which is just so good. I've been listening to it while working lately and loving every second of it. Nebula is just a really unique, fun, fresh environment. It kind of makes watching videos on the internet fun again. Speaking of which, here's the really fun part. Nebula is already cheaper than almost any other streaming platform on the internet, like $2.50 per month. That cheap. But right now, for a limited time only, we're offering you the chance to get Nebula for life. Just $300 one time, and you never have to pay again. No matter how big the platform gets, how fancy the content gets, unlike other streaming services, you can pay for this once and have access to it forever if you want to. In fact, right now you can even gift a lifetime subscription to a friend. All you have to do to get started is click the link in the description or go to go.nebula.tv/TaleFoundry and sign up for 1 year. That's it. Again, that's just $2.50 a month or $300 one time to get access for life. Frankly, I'm not quite sure how they can afford to do all this, but I'm definitely not complaining. Seriously, take advantage of this offer while it's still going. I don't think any better one exists in the world of streaming. Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next week. Bye!